friends, welcome back to my channel, Life as Tiff Knows It. I'm Tiff, and I'm here today to give you a beginner's guide to how to loom knit with a basic ewrap stitch. The ewrap stitch is a very good one to start with. It is the least complicated stitch that I know of to do on a loom. It creates a beautiful, like, traditional knitting effect on whatever project that you have, and it is probably one of the fastest stitches that you can do to complete a project. This stitch itself does curl slightly, so I do recommend if you're working on a project that you want to be flat, such as a dish rag or a blanket or a scarf, that you either look into creating your creation on a scarf loom or a double-sided loom, or if it's a hat that you're doing, you create a brim, or you combine the stitch with other stitches. I just realized there's something on that yarn. Okay, so to get started, I have in front of me a loom that does not have an anchor peg. You might be working, if you have a plastic loom, there most likely will be a peg that juts out on the side of the loom itself. And what you would do in that instance is you would simply just tie a knot around that anchor peg, and you're going to start on the peg on your loom set that's closest to the anchor peg. For example, if the peg was sticking out right here, then I'd probably start on that peg. Because we don't have an anchor peg, I thought it'd be actually helpful to show you what do you do if you do not have an anchor peg. These pegs do come in and out. This is a kind of build your own loom. This is the Martha Stewart loom that I don't really see much in craft stores anymore. You can get it on like eBay and such. So what you're going to do is what's nice is you can pick where you're starting on the loom, and you simply tie a knot. Tie a knot around whatever peg you're working on. Now, when you go back around the loom, once you loom everything and you do your stitch, it's going to be extremely important to be careful on this, because we do not want that knot to come undone. Once we have a couple of rows on this loom, it's not going to be as big of a deal at all. Okay, so what I'm showing you today, like I mentioned, is the basic ewrap stitch. And with a loom, you do have the choice to work around the loom in either direction. You can go clockwise, or you can go counterclockwise. And what I have seen works best for most people, it depends on their dominant hand. So left-handed people I see mostly like to work around the loom this way. It's because their dominant hand is kind of in motion on the side of their body if they're left-handed. And right-handed people usually go counterclockwise on the loom this way. That is what I've seen most. That's not necessarily true for whatever person. My theory is I think just do whatever is most comfortable for you, especially with the ewrap stitch. This is a beginner's guide, so most likely you're watching this as a beginner, and so you got to try different things and see what works for you. But you can work both ways, and I will show you both ways of how to work around the loom. So the trick to loom knitting with an ewrap stitch is it's extremely hard to mess up a project. A lot of these things that you can fix if you make an error. You don't have to count rows. That's why I personally like loom knitting over traditional knitting or crocheting, which I have tried. I like this because it's a little bit more mindless, and you can create beautiful projects by just doing different stitches and creating things with different yarn. I think that creatability is definitely there with loom knitting. With an ewrap stitch, what we're going to do, and the trick is you always want, trying to get that to focus a little better, to go around the pegs in a certain motion. You want to go behind the peg first and then in front. Sometimes I explain it, you go inside the loom first and then out. So you go behind, front, behind, front, behind, front. It's kind of like you go forward, backwards, forward, backwards. You always go behind the peg. If you go in front, what happens is it creates a tightness with the yarn that's just extremely hard to work with as you're doing the next steps that we're talking about. Okay, I'm also going to show you before we get too far how to do it if you're going to go around the loom clockwise. So likewise, you go around this way, but you also apply that same rule. You go behind the peg, in front of the peg, behind the peg, in front of the peg, behind, front, forwards, forward, behind, whoops, looking in the camera view, so it's hard for me to actually see. Okay, forward, and then back, forward, behind, back, and front, forward, behind, back, and front, all the way around. Now, I am gonna switch back now to doing it like this. You might notice that I'm doing something with my other hand. I'm using one hand to guide the yarn around the peg, and I'm using my other hand, this is especially important as beginners, to hold the yarn in place as I'm going around. This becomes relevant because if you let go of the yarn, or if you just do a motion in the wrong way, it will come undone, which can be kind of frustrating at first. But so again, we're going behind, front. I'm going to do it really slow for the next couple ones. Okay, behind, front, behind, front, inside the loom, outside, inside, outside. Okay, sorry about that. Had to take a toddler break. So again, behind, front, behind, front, and you're going to hear her a little bit upset, I think. So you keep going all the way around the loom. Whoops, it is easy to accidentally get two pegs, and then you just correct it. Behind, front. You'll notice that if you go in front, it's going to look different. You see how that looks different? Your cross is in the front where it crosses. If you see that, you've done it wrong. Correct yourself with that. And then we just keep going all the way around the loom. Okay. Okay. And as we start approaching our other, where we've already come across here, this is going to be the only time that we keep going in the loom. There's always going to be either one or two rows on your loom. And also, I will say that this is a very fine gauged loom, meaning that the spaces between the pegs is it's not as wide as most looms, like a plastic loom. So projects on this loom naturally are going to take longer, and you're going to have less thick yarn that you can use with this. You can do thick yarn. So what you're going to do now is you're going to push the pegs down where the yarn is on the pegs all the way around the loom. It's not going to matter terribly if they're completely clear down. You just want to make room for another row that you're going to go around and do the exact same motion with. Okay, so then I am currently on the peg in which I started. Here is my tail of yarn. And we're just going to go around one more time doing the same motion. Behind, front, behind, front. All right, I'm going to kind of go quickly here to show you the next step. And I truly feel that there are three main steps to loom knitting. There is wrapping around the pegs. The step we're doing right now, we're wrapping the yarn around the pegs. The next step is going to be putting the bottom row over the top row. And then the last step is pushing the yarn down to make the top row your new bottom row. And if you're confused by that, I don't blame you. You might be a visual learner like me, so I'll show you exactly what I mean. So we're going around, da, 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 da. Okay, behind, front. And you will get into a motion with this, just like anything new that you're trying. It takes a bit, like your muscles need to learn, how do I do this? It's like riding a bike. It doesn't happen overnight. Oops, sorry, I wasn't in the frame very much there. Okay, now, in every loom knitting kit there's a little hook. And you'll notice that if you look at these pegs, any peg that you get with looms, there's a groove in here, and that's very intentional with that groove. Okay, you always want to start on the peg in which your tail of yarn is, because once you put, what you do is you use this groove as your friend, and you put the hook in there, grab the yarn, and put it over the top. Once you do that with your first row, it cannot come undone. So your hand is free. Okay, now this is the peg in which we started and where the yarn is in a knot. So you just want to be so very careful. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll do the next peg by it first to kind of loosen it. That really loosens up the yarn. And we now have our tail over. Okay, so what we'll do is we will now do the same thing. If you're seeing that you're accidentally hooking both, what you can do is put this bottom row down a little further and separate these. Oops, 1 second. There's a lot of clumsiness involved with me in loom knitting at times, and that's okay. Okay, so we then do exactly what we did before. This motion of putting it under there and kind of lifting it up. There is a bit of slack that will come from the bottom row, and it is going to tighten itself up naturally. You do not want to pull like too much. You're just pulling enough in an upward motion to get that yarn on the hook. Okay, I'm going to slow down and show you. It's kind of like a motion where you're scooping it up by twisting it. You go like that. You keep your other hand on the loom to secure it. And this is just me showing you my way of loom knitting. There are different ways that I've seen. I personally just like to go around the loom. Some people like it flat on a surface. If you're sitting down, you can absolutely do that. A lot of times I'll have the loom in my lap. This particular loom, this peg is just not cooperating. You might have to push it down. Okay. And we're going to continue to go around and around and around. Oh my, I have a screaming toddler in the background. Sorry about that. And we just keep going around. This, I think, is my favorite part of loom knitting. Putting the bottom over the top. I like to secure these pegs with my hand at times. You can see some of them are kind of wanting to move outwardly. If they pop out, you just put them back in. It is kind of annoying. The benefit to these looms is you can make a lot of unique projects that you can't on the other looms. All right, so we just have done two steps so far. We wrapped the yarn around. We put the bottom over the top using our hook, and now our top row becomes our bottom row. And I like to use the inside of the loom to just use my fingers to gently pull down the yarn. Okay, and now we're just doing again what we've done before, where we're wrapping using the ewrap, going again behind, front. I cannot emphasize how important that piece is. Once you get it, you get it, but it might take a little bit of like really thinking about behind, front. going like that. Okay, and then it's the same motion over and over again, those 3 steps. After this, we're going to put the bottom row over the top. We're going to push down our top row so it becomes our bottom, and we keep going. A hat like this, because we're using such fine yarn, is probably going to be at least 50 rows. I will make a video at one point of how to make a basic brim on a loom. However, this video is really just introducing the steps of loom knitting, how to cast on to a loom without a peg, an anchor peg, and showing you the basic ewrap stitch. Okay, so I'll get us to the end here and secure our row one more time. I'll show you a little bit of what the stitch is starting to look like. Again, once I get, you always stop at the peg where you see then that there's 2 next to it. I would not wrap it around again. Okay, and then you always start at the peg adjacent to it to create this yarn right here, because if there's not yarn in between each of these pegs, it's going to look like a hole. So I always take my other hand and I keep the yarn here, because if I were to let go, it would come undone. And then I take my hook and I put the bottom over the top right at that one so that my yarn will not come undone. Okay, so you just have learned the 3 steps of doing a basic hat, with the exception of taking it off of the loom, which I am happy to make a video about. Hope this was helpful. Hope this inspires you to do some loom knitting. I think it's such a fun, therapeutic craft, and you can make such beautiful, beautiful hats and scarves and other projects with it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you're seeing, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you later. Bye, friends.